My brother's wife treated me like a servant while I nursed him back to health, only to kick me out once he recovered. They didn't realize the house was never his. My father left it to me under a condition they just accidentally triggered. The first time I realized how fragile life could be was the night my brother collapsed in the hallway. His skin was pale, his breath shallow, and his body trembled as though every ounce of strength had drained from him. I rushed forward, catching him before he hit the floor, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. His wife stood frozen at the doorway, clutching her phone, more annoyed than alarmed. I didn't wait for her to act. I carried him to bed, fetched water, and called the doctor myself. That moment marked the beginning of weeks that would test every fiber of my being. From that day my life became a cycle of care. I woke before dawn to prepare his meals. Simple broths, soft bread, and herbal teas my father once swore by. I cleaned his sheets when fever drenched them in sweat, and I sat by his bedside through long nights, listening to his labored breathing. His wife barely lifted a finger. She would walk past the room, glance in, and mutter about the smell or the mess, but never once did she kneel beside him or hold his hand. I became both nurse and servant, though no one had asked me. My heart simply wouldn't allow me to leave him helpless. Her coldness grew sharper with each passing day. She barked orders at me as if I were hired help. "Wipe the floor properly," she snapped when I spilled broth in my rush. "Don't sit there all day, you'll make him weak with your pity," she sneered when she saw me holding his hand. I swallowed my pride, biting back words that burned on my tongue. My father had taught me that family duty was heavier than personal comfort, and I clung to that lesson. Still, her cruelty cut deep. I often wondered how a woman could be so heartless toward the man she claimed to love. There were nights when doubt crept in like a shadow. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the dim light, tears slipping down my cheeks. Was I foolish to stay? Was I sacrificing myself for nothing? My hands were raw from scrubbing, my body weary from sleepless nights, and my spirit bruised from her constant insults. Yet in those moments I remembered my father's voice. Sacrifice carries unseen rewards. Patience is sharper than anger. His words became my anchor. I wiped my tears, straightened my back, and returned to my brother's side, determined to endure. Not everyone was blind to my struggle. Neighbors noticed. One evening, old Mrs. Khan knocked softly and handed me a pot of soup. "You look tired, child," she whispered, her eyes kind. Another neighbor, a young man who often passed by, paused to say, "You're stronger than most. Don't let her break you." These small kindnesses were like drops of water on parched soil. They reminded me that I wasn't invisible, that someone saw the weight I carried. Their encouragement gave me strength to face another day of her scorn. The turning point came slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. My brother's fever eased, his appetite returned, and his voice grew steadier. I watched him sit up for the first time in weeks, his eyes clearer, his smile faint but real. Relief washed over me, so powerful I nearly collapsed myself. I thought at last there would be gratitude, perhaps even a word of thanks. But instead his wife stood at the doorway, arms crossed, and said coldly, "He doesn't need you anymore. Pack your things and leave." Her words struck harder than any insult before. After all the sleepless nights, the endless care, the sacrifices I had made, she dismissed me as if I were nothing more than a burden. My brother looked down, silent, too weak or too ashamed to speak. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't argue. I simply nodded, turned away, and began to gather my belongings. Inside, though, a storm brewed. She thought she had won, that she had rid herself of me. What she didn't know was that her cruelty had set something in motion, something my father had foreseen long ago. I carried my bag down the stairs, each step echoing louder than the last. My brother sat silently in the living room, his eyes fixed on the floor, while his wife leaned against the wall with a smug smile. She thought she had won. She thought her words had pushed me out for good. What she didn't know was that her cruelty had just sealed her own fate. My father's will was not a simple piece of paper. It was a carefully crafted document, written with foresight and wisdom. He had known the nature of people, their pride, their arrogance, and their tendency to forget kindness. He had left the house to me, but with a condition. If anyone in the household treated me unfairly or forced me out, the ownership would be locked permanently in my name. It wasn't just a gift, it was a test of character. And that test had just been failed. As I walked out with my bag, I kept my face calm. Inside, however, a quiet satisfaction stirred. I didn't need to shout or argue. I didn't need to prove myself. The truth was already written, waiting to unfold. My father had given me a shield, and she had struck against it without even realizing. The days that followed were strange. I stayed with a neighbor for a short while, helping her with chores in exchange for a bed and warm meals. From her window I could see the house, my house, standing tall, its walls holding secrets they didn't yet know. His wife strutted around the yard, giving orders to workers, planning renovations and speaking loudly about her home. She walked with her chin high as if the world belonged to her. My brother followed quietly, still recovering, too weak to challenge her. Their arrogance blinded them. One afternoon I passed by the market and overheard her voice. She was boasting to a group of women about how she had finally gotten rid of me. She thought she was important, she laughed, but this house is ours. She was just a guest who overstayed. The women nodded politely, though I caught the flicker of discomfort in their eyes. Pride has a way of isolating people, and she was too wrapped in her own illusions to notice. I returned to my neighbor's home, sat by the window and allowed myself a small smile. They had no idea what was coming. My father's lawyer had already contacted me, saying he would visit in a few days to finalize matters. I didn't rush. I didn't warn them. I wanted the truth to arrive like a storm, sudden and undeniable. When the lawyer finally came, it was a quiet morning. He knocked firmly on the door, carrying a folder under his arm. I followed him inside, my steps steady, my heart calm. My brother and his wife were seated in the living room. She looked irritated at the intrusion while he seemed uneasy. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the folder. "I'm here regarding the property," he said. "Your late father left specific instructions in his will." Her face lit up, expecting confirmation of her ownership. She leaned forward, eager, while my brother sat back, uncertain. The lawyer continued, his voice firm. The house was left to his daughter, not to his son. And there was a condition attached. If she was ever treated unfairly or forced out, the ownership would be sealed permanently in her name. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. My brother's wife froze, her smile vanishing. My brother's eyes widened, his lips parting in disbelief. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "That can't be true. This is his house. He lived here." The lawyer shook his head. "It was his decision. His words are clear. The property belongs to her now without dispute." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is unfair. She manipulated him. She doesn't deserve this." Her voice rose, sharp and desperate. My brother tried to calm her, but his own face was pale, his hands shaking. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't need to speak. The truth was already laid bare. My father's handwriting carried more weight than any argument. Justice had been served without me lifting a finger. They argued with the lawyer, insisting it was a mistake, demanding explanations, but the more they spoke, the more foolish they sounded. The lawyer remained calm, repeating the words of the will, pointing to the signatures, the seals, the undeniable proof. Their disbelief turned to anger, then to silence. I watched them crumble, their arrogance stripped away. She looked at me with eyes full of fury, as if I had stolen something from her. My brother avoided my gaze, shame written across his face. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply sat in silence, letting the weight of the moment sink in. When the lawyer left, the house felt different. The air was heavy, the walls seemed to echo with my father's wisdom. She stormed upstairs, slamming doors, while my brother lingered in the room, staring at me as if searching for words he couldn't find. I stood, adjusted my shawl and walked toward the window. The sunlight streamed in, warm and steady, reminding me that patience had carried me here. The truth was mine not because I fought for it but because I endured. My father had seen beyond pride and cruelty, and his will had protected me. Their disbelief didn't matter. Their anger didn't matter. The house was mine and justice had spoken. The lawyer's footsteps had barely faded when silence swallowed the room. My brother sat hunched, his hands trembling, while his wife stormed upstairs, slamming doors as though noise could undo the truth. I stood near the window, the sunlight warming my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The house was mine, not through force, not through argument, but through patience. Their downfall began almost immediately. Without the house, their pride had nowhere to stand. Friends who once admired their wealth and influence began to drift away. I overheard whispers in the market. She treated her sister-in-law poorly. Did you hear what happened? The same women who once gathered around her now avoided her gaze. Invitations stopped arriving and the smiles she relied on turned into cold nods. My brother too felt the sting. Men who once praised him now shook their heads, muttering about how blind he had been. Their arrogance had crumbled, piece by piece until nothing remained but shame. One evening my brother came to me. He stood at the doorway, hesitant, his voice heavy with regret. I didn't see it, he admitted quietly. I didn't see how she treated you. I should have stopped it. I should have defended you. His eyes glistened and for a moment, I saw the boy I had grown up with, not the man who had let silence betray me. I listened, my heart torn between anger and compassion. He was my brother and though his weakness had hurt me, his regret was real. You were blind, I said softly, but blindness can be cured if you choose to open your eyes. He nodded, his shoulders sagging and left without another word. His wife, however, grew bitter. She cursed my father's will, muttered about injustice and blamed me for everything. I heard her pacing the upstairs rooms, her voice sharp, her words filled with resentment. She tried to rally support, calling old friends, but one by one they turned away. Even those she once controlled with charm or intimidation refused to stand by her. Isolation wrapped around her like a cold cloak. She was alone not because I had pushed her there, but because her own cruelty had driven everyone away. I returned to the house quietly, not with pride but with peace. I walked through each room, touching the walls, remembering my father's laughter, his wisdom, his steady presence. I opened the windows wide, letting fresh air sweep away the bitterness that had lingered. I filled the kitchen with warmth, cooking meals that carried the scent of home. I tended the garden, planting flowers my father loved, watching them bloom under the sun. The house became mine not just in name but in spirit. It was no longer a place of cruelty, it was a place of kindness, of patience, of quiet triumph. The lesson I carried forward was simple yet profound. Sacrifice is never wasted. Every sleepless night, every insult endured, every tear shed had led me here. Cruelty always finds its punishment, not through revenge but through its own weight. And patience can be the sharpest form of revenge. My father's wisdom lived on through me, guiding me, protecting me, reminding me that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. As I sat in the garden one evening, the sun dipping low, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. My brother visited occasionally, quieter now, humbled by what had happened. His wife rarely appeared, her bitterness consuming her. And I lived with peace, knowing that I had endured, that I had triumphed, not by fighting but by waiting. My father's hand had written the truth and I had carried it forward. Justice had been delivered without me lifting a hand. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all.